So my name is Liz Ha. I am the Director of Strategic Partnerships at 5 Talents. And thank you for joining me. I realize that you have been through several days of inspiration and listening to speakers. So I imagine that your tanks are pretty full right now and you're saturated with information. And so I would love, I would just welcome you to interrupt me as much as you would like. This is a small group. And so, please feel free to take advantage of that and just ask me as many questions as you would like. If something I said resonates or doesn't make sense, please do so. I'm sure I always love it in these workshops when it's more conversational and there's more dialogue versus just having a talking head speak at you with facts and figures. So that being said, just to give you a little history on 5 Talents and my organization. About 20 years ago, there was a conference of bishops, and there was a bishop from Uganda that said, "This is wonderful, this gathering, and all the things that we are talking about is very inspirational. But I cannot go back to my country where people are starving and share the gospel with them, because empty stomachs make for blocked up ears." And so I think that was really kind of the genesis of what can we do to empower the global church to meaningfully respond to extreme poverty. And hence this whole idea of how to use micro enterprise development in partnership with the local church for transformation kind of happened. So 5 Talents, we work in 8 countries in the global South. For some reason, oh, there you go. My key got jammed. And you can see these are the 8 countries in purple. We are heavily clustered in sub-Saharan East Africa, where we do a lot of ministry, but we also work in Asia and Myanmar and Bolivia. And so I think it's, well, just going on. So that's where we work. And what we do is basically we facilitate micro enterprise development, where we recruit men and women from the community to train them up in how to start a business. And so we teach them business skills and we teach them how to save. But oftentimes, before we even get to the savings portions and business portions, we have to teach people to be literate and numerate. And so we teach literacy and numeracy, but very basic. This is just so people can make change in the marketplace and know they're not getting cheated, to know enough literacy and how to make, do record keeping. And then after about 6 months of business training and also savings together in a group, this is where we kind of call it our Shark Tank phase. I don't know if you're familiar with the TV show Shark Tank, but people start pitching their business ideas. And the groups are self-sustained and self-moderated in the sense that these groups, they nominate their own officers, they decide what interest rates are fair and reasonable, and they decide who gets to enter into the group. The 5 Talents facilitator will provide the training and the mentorship, but this is really about empowerment. And this is kind of like a theme that I hope to just continue on in my workshop, and talking about the difference between empowerment and dependency. It's very, it's a nuance, but it's an important one, and particularly in the areas where we work. And so then after about 6 months of that, you can try and try for your first loan, and the group will decide whether or not they think you're ready, and they'll give you counsel and advice and mentorship in taking out your first loan. And then I have to say also that the loans that we make, 80% of our participants, over 80% of our participants are women. And they are women that would never qualify for a loan at a local microfinance institution that are geared to help the poor. And that's because oftentimes the interest rates are probably too high for these women, or because of gender discrimination in the areas that women just cannot secure a loan. They're too much of a risk in consideration. And yet our loan repayment rates, I would say, are approximately 95%. In some areas, that's even higher in some countries, and in some countries it's a little lower, but on average, it's fairly high. So it's something that we're really proud of our program participants. And then after a loan is made and the interest, they have to continue to pay whatever fair interest that the group has decided upon. And then they can apply for another loan to continue to grow their business. And then it becomes self-sustaining. But that is kind of, that's a little bit of a drier example of the steps in the process of our work. I think that it's important to add that these groups, this is a picture of one of our savings groups in Uganda, I believe. And you can tell, like, you see in the middle, it's a little box. That's a little steel box, and that's their bank. And in that box, there are 3 locks, and 3 different people will hold the key to that lock, and the box travels around the savings group. And each group they come in, and each group they tally, and each person sees. The level of transparency is very high. And usually in some of the groups, you can see like a big chalkboard where they write it all down. This one, since they're meeting outside, obviously there's no chalkboard, but the record keeping is there in front of everyone. And so there's a high level of accountability, but oftentimes a lot of these savings groups, because there's no community bank or in the village, or because, they're not able to work through a bank for a variety of reasons, this is the safest place and an opportunity for them to save income. So it's very grassroots. It's very humble, and yet it works. Yeah, I love this picture. It's beautiful too. So the other thing, the other thing that I want to add to about the groups that I think is significant is that the groups are not only like a savings groups, it's not like a mechanism to just save and invest, but they also become incredibly tight. So typically the minimum requirement is a year before a group will disperse funds of their investments to the rest of the group. And then the group can decide, okay, do we want to continue on, or do we want to take a break, or is this not for me? And it is not uncommon for groups to continue on for years. We have savings groups that have gone on for like 10 years plus. And that's because the groups become kind of like a fellowship group. They become very committed to one another. It's a source of support. These are not the loans. They're not credit-led loans. They're savings-led loans. And that is a very important distinction, because these women have skin in the game. This is their hard-earned savings that they put into this loan to invest into their neighbors, their friends, businesses. And so they want your business to succeed, of course, because they have money invested in it, but they want to succeed because they also really care about one another. So there's a high level of just social investment within the group. And part of the 5 Talents curriculum and training of Teaching business training and skills is we bake in within that like Christian principles and biblical stories. So we talk about what does it mean to have a business that is honoring and honest, that because you're a businesswoman or businessman, it doesn't mean it's not a zero-sum game. You know, as you rise, other people don't have to go down. But as you rise, you can bring up other people. And in that process, how can you bless your community? So we talk a lot about what it means to steward your talents and your gifts, that even as people living in extreme poverty, God has given you giftings, God has given you talents that you can use. And so it's not like we tell them everyone is going to learn how to sew, everyone is going to learn how to make mats. This is very much a challenge. What can you do in particular with your skill set, with where you live? Like, look around in your village. What are the needs of your village? And how can you meet those needs? And then thinking of a business plan that will help get you there and growing your business. So I think this is a very big part of empowerment too, that these women feel like, hey, this is something I in particular have thought of in my business. And I've received the training in knowing how to grow that and start that up. And someone believes in me that they are giving me this loan. So I also think within these savings and loans groups, one of the things that we also have is a specific mercy fund that is built in. And people from the group contribute to the mercy fund, and they decide, like, if there's someone in great need within their group, like maybe they had like an accident or illness befall them. Of course, no one has medical insurance. So how to help their fellow savings group members through that particularly hard time. And oftentimes, especially with COVID, the Mercy Fund has just been a true lifeline in helping out their fellow savings group members. And also, I think something that is very particular to these savings groups that is honestly very countercultural is that the savings groups are a place for the marginalized. When Five Talents first started, we did not seek out to be a ministry that catered towards women. We sought to be a ministry that would go to the most vulnerable regions of the world and minister to the most marginalized. And it just happened to be that more women and women would come. And then they would invite their friends, they would invite their neighbors, and it just grew and grew tenfold to give women more of an opportunity. And we have found time and time again that it's like through women specifically that when you invest in a woman, she invests in her family and invests in the village. And then all of a sudden you'll have changed the culture of a village. Or I shouldn't say the culture, but influenced the village and impacted the village. And you know, we kind of joke that Five Talents has so many requests from different bishops in different dioceses because they see how their churches in the diocese where we have programs are able to make their annual membership fees very quickly. And of course, that's not the real reason where they want Five Talents to come, but it's just an indicator of the flourishing of a community, how this affects how our savings groups not only affect the individual getting out of extreme poverty, but just the community at large. And speaking of bishops, I think the other very important thing to note that's important about our ministry is the empowerment of the local church. In a lot of the communities and regions where we work, they are post-conflict or current conflict is going on. So there are areas where there's often little government infrastructure. And frankly, probably a lot of the regions where we work, there's not a lot of nonprofits on the ground either. So it is in those particular places where the church just has a profound impact in the communities, unlike anything here in the States. The church is where you go to for your social services. The church is the trusted entity, and oftentimes the only trusted entity, because, you know, the government, where do you go to for your needs and for help? Because the government unfortunately cannot help you because of limitations of infrastructure or because of corruption. So people go to their local church. It is the trusted entity. It's the church does not flee in times of war. The church does not flee in times of an Ebola breakout. And so they are a trusted quantity within the community. And so we hear time and time again, ad nauseum, I knew I could join this group because I found out about it through my church. And I knew I could join this group because my pastor invited me. It's over and over again. And so we have found that it's a wonderful partnership because we empower the church to meaningfully respond to the needs of their community, but also it gives us credibility as well, knowing that we are a trustworthy program to join. And I also want to add that Five Talents, we don't go anywhere unless we don't start any new program unless there is a church partnership in place on the ground. So that is a very important part of the ethos of our ministry philosophy too, that we only work where we can actually be embedded within the country and within the community. And so that's why, for instance, again, when there is like an Ebola breakout or when there is any kind of violence or conflict that might arise, you know, we're not evacuating any kind of Western workers, but these are people that are committed to staying where they are because this is their home. You know, they're not going to leave. And so I think that is a big reason why we are able to work in the areas where we are working, and because the people that are serving and ministering to those areas are local. So all these to say, feel like I can tell you and explain and describe our programs, but it's always best when you have a story to illustrate. And this is one of my favorites. So a woman named Monica, who lives in rural Kenya. She lives about 2 hours away from the local town up a dirt road. And Monica grew up with just an elementary education. She had to drop out of school, I think in the 5th grade. Her parents could not afford the school fees. Monica had one dress growing up, and she ended up marrying a subsistence farmer, and they, you know, farmed for a living as well as for their livelihood. And I think it was enough, just enough, until they had children. And then it quickly was not enough. So Monica was invited to a savings group, and she received training on how to start a business and started to save very small amounts. But eventually she was able to get her first loan. And the first loan was $20. And she decided, she had noticed where she lived that there was nowhere to get gas. There would be people that would be riding on their motorbikes that go by, but there was nowhere nearby because she lived so far from the closest town to buy any kind of petrol. So with her first loan, Monica bought, as you can see, a drum of gas like this. She bought one drum of gas, and she would sell a cup of gas at a time the side of a dirt road, just selling like a little one cup of gas to like the motorcyclists that would go by. And eventually she'd sell everything out. And eventually she just grew her business from a side of the road vendor. And she was able to take out another loan. She was able to hire other women in her village. And then she eventually was able to hire her husband. And she grew her business selling gasoline till now. She has a gasoline station as well as an auto parts store. And so eventually she even was able to dig and install a gasoline tank underground because it was quite dangerous what she was doing, just having all that gas out. But, and the most wonderful thing of all is that all 4 of her children are in school, and she was able to send her oldest to university. So Monica, I think, is just like a really wonderful example of not only has her life changed and her children's life, but she's been able to bless so many other families from those other women that she's hired out and have employment through Monica. And Monica also, she makes now 20 times the average monthly salary as a local subsistence farmer. So she has well exceeded anything that she could have done had she not received the training, had she not received a loan, had she not received just a little bit of help to get her there. But she thought of it all on her own. She's the one that, saw the need, and she's the one that thought, okay, this is a specific need. How can I meet it? Pretty amazing. And these are just 2 quotes that I love because I think it just really encapsulates a lot of what our savings and loan groups are about. One is from a woman, Frida from Burundi. She said, "I became transformed in learning how to plan a business and the qualities of a godly woman and mother. Since joining the program, God has transformed my life in how I plan and how I behave. In my community, I was chosen as a local leader and a counselor. As a widow, I have finally built my own house, and my children have continued their studies." And Jenna says, "I am a single mother with 6 children. I prayed that God would help me to raise them by myself. Then I was invited to join this savings group. I wanted to thank our facilitator, Mary, for how she has mentored us. I've been able to provide for the children and myself. Thanks be to God that in our home, when my children request to have some meat for a meal, I just plan and save a little extra for 3 days, and then I can buy them a meal that includes meat." So, not to be blasé, I find these quotes very inspiring. Obviously, I shared them, but I cannot tell you how many quotes exactly like this that we have from our program participants. Mother of 6, mother of 4, mother of 7, single mom. A lot of our program participants, majority, I would say, I don't have the exact percentage, but a huge portion of them are single moms or widows that have been widowed because of conflict or from a variety of other reasons, that have no other option. And this is kind of the only place that they can go to save, but they are desperate to provide for their family. And in a lot of the areas where we work, unfortunately, there's an incredible social stigma to being single and having children, particularly for those women that have been victims of sexual assault or have found themselves in situations of early marriage. And frankly, I should just say child marriage. So a lot of times those women will find themselves in situations because of the social stigma is so strong and because of issues of gender inequity, they'll be ostracized by their own family. And so we have found that our savings groups within our savings groups, we do a lot of teaching, not only of the skills, as I had mentioned before, but we talk a lot about things that are biblical and that are countercultural, like what it means to love your neighbor, what it means to bless your neighbor through your own blessings, right? And we have found this this kind of popping up again and again of our savings groups, women just inviting these women in that have no other place. These single moms, like, come to this savings group. You need to learn this stuff. And that's the carrot. But what they learn, because, they want to get out of poverty, but then what they find out about through that is way beyond just how to start a business. They find a community that loves them. They find a church that will support them when society has left them. And they learn how to read and write. They learn how to raise their children. We also, in addendum to teaching literacy and numeracy, because this is such an issue we're seeing of these single moms, these young single moms, that we also include parenting and teaching parenting classes as part of the curriculum, because it's such a practical need. These children don't know how to raise children, right? So all of these things, they're kind of plus things that it's almost, I feel like we need a better name than a savings and loan group to encapsulate what we do. But for intensive purposes, it is a savings and loan group with so many additions. And I think through all of that, I just want to loop around to the idea of empowerment and why that isn't so important within our ministry ethos. And it's illustrated by the fact that several years ago, the World Health Organization, they did an extensive survey, and they surveyed people from the West, and they asked them, what does poverty mean to you? And think in your head, what does poverty mean to you? When I was asked this question, I just thought, poverty means you can't afford to have regular meals. Poverty means you can't afford to go to school. Poverty means you can't afford shelter, very basic things. I don't know if that's what you're thinking, but that's what I thought. And that's what apparently a lot of Westerners thought. Those were all good answers, all understandable answers. When they asked people from countries that had high populations in extreme poverty, those are populations like under $1.90 a day of income. What does poverty mean to you? The answer was vastly different. One of the most resounding answers was shame. Poverty means shame. And God does not want us to live in shame. And so because of that, 5 Talents seeks to go into those areas to offer hope, to offer empowerment, to give women a different option than living in shame.